首先，让我们邀请 TrendLabs 趋势科技全球技术支援与研发中心 Paul Oliveria 为我们带来全球重大 APT 攻击事件剖析，请以热烈的掌声欢迎 Paul Oliveria。
大家好，我叫 Paul. Did I get that correctly? Yeah, so those are the Chinese phrases that I only know, so I apologize in advance. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Oliveria, and I am a technical marketing manager in TrendLabs. TrendLabs is the technical support and research center of Trend Micro, and we are headquartered in Manila. So I was asked to discuss about the trends in targeted attacks, also known as APTs. Okay, so for the next 40 minutes, I will be discussing these updates. Just a couple of requests on my end. If you have questions in the presentation, please take note of them for the meantime. Okay, we'll have a separate Q&A session towards the end of this session. Okay. Second one is that I have the tendency to speak a little fast. So if you're having a hard time catching up, just raise my attention. Is that good? Okay. Third one is that I hope you have had a good lunch. Did you guys have good lunch? Have you eaten? Right? Because just a warning, okay, you might lose your appetite after this presentation because there's a lot of really scary stuff here. Okay, starting with this picture. Okay, it's a picture that I found on the internet. Okay, it's quite funny because it reminds me of my father. He looks like that when he's angry at me. Okay, but I would like you to focus on the text at the bottom. It says there, APT. You keep using that term. I do not think it means what you think it means. And for me, it's a good way to sum up the buzz around advanced persistent threats, or APTs, is all about. Do you guys agree? How many here have heard about APTs? Can you raise your hand? Okay, quite a few, quite a few. How many here can give a good definition of what APT is? Okay, just a few. So that exactly is the point of this picture, right? APT has been like a buzzword for about a couple of months now, even years. We've heard about it, it's been constantly being talked about, but the problem with buzzwords is that people tend to associate different meanings on it. It may cause confusion. We have a different interpretation of one person, we have a different interpretation of what APT is versus another person on the other side of the room. Wikipedia does not help either. This is the definition of advanced persistent threats found in Wikipedia, right? But I do not ask you to read this because it's quite long and it's quite small. But it just shows that the definition of APT has become so confusing that we in Trend Micro, as a security industry for over 20 years now, need to have our own definition or to consolidate the definitions of what APT is. For your information, advanced persistent threats have been a definition used by the military before for state-sponsored attacks. But as you all know, some of the APTs that we have been hearing now are mostly surrounding businesses, right? So at that particular point, there's already a cause of confusion there. Okay? So for Trend Micro, advanced persistent threats are also known as highly targeted attacks. Okay? These are computer intrusions staged by threat actors, not necessarily cybercriminals, but threat actors that aggressively pursue and compromise specific targets. They usually involve malware, okay, and social engineering in order to maintain a persistent presence inside the network. Okay? And they move laterally throughout the network to extract sensitive information. They want to be as undetected as possible so that they can go inside the network and be there to be, to persist its existence, so to speak. Okay. So these are the three main points of how Trend Micro defines APTs. It was coined by one of our researchers, Nart Villeneuve. He has a paper available on Trend Micro website that's all about the trends in targeted attacks. Okay? Let me give you an example of what an APT is that we're seeing right now. Do you know who this is? I'm sure you do, right? This is Jeremy Lin. Is he popular here in Taiwan? Well, I'm not surprised because he's Taiwanese American, right? So Jeremy Lin, for those of you who do not follow American basketball, which I'm sure no one, okay, he's a Taiwanese American NBA player who used to play for New York Knicks, but now he's playing for which team? You know? Houston Rockets. Okay? But anyway, Jeremy Lin is a popular basketball player, especially during the early months of 2012, right? When he helped New York Knicks win back-to-back games around, like, let's say, early February or March, right? So you know that Jeremy Lin became so popular that there's a term that was associated with him. It's called Linsanity. So Linsanity was so popular at that time that did you know that Jeremy Lin was also used as a social engineering bait for advanced persistent threat? So around February or March, our researchers received email samples containing a document. Here's what you need to know all about Jeremy Lin, the NBA superstar. But when you open the document, it's actually a booby trap document. It exploits vulnerability in Microsoft Office, and that's where the APT campaign starts. Further analysis on our end showed that this attack is actually part of the Lurid campaign, which, as of that date, has already infected more than 1,400 computers in 61 countries, including the Asian countries like Vietnam, India, Mongolia, and China. So that's how mainstream APTs is nowadays. So not only it exploits the recent trends in popular culture or what's being talked about, it also shows that it's able to evolve its techniques as fast as these trends come and go. Lurid has been existing for a couple of years now, but when he saw an opportunity to use Jeremy Lin, they were able to use it. This example also allows us to gain more insight of the characteristics of what APT is. Okay? So usually, they are part of a broader campaign. So contrary to the term targeted attacks, okay, it does not just target one organization or one country, but rather it's part of a campaign. Think of it like a sniper with a hit list. A sniper does not just shoot one person, right? Sometimes it has its own list of who to target. Sometimes they fail, but most of the time they're succeeded. Okay? That's how APTs work. It's part of a larger campaign, but it's still very targeted. They may exploit vulnerabilities in popular software, not just operating systems like the Windows or the Mac or Unix, but more importantly, they exploit vulnerabilities in applications being used in organizations. In the case of Jeremy Lin, Lurid used a Word document that exploits vulnerability in Microsoft Office. Some of the investigations that we've had also use malicious PDF files, so the usual document sharing applications that organizations or companies use. We should also note that these vulnerabilities are not necessarily zero-day. We have seen several campaigns that use older vulnerabilities, perhaps banking on the idea that organizations can no longer patch this, either because it's a legacy system that's not supported, or because it's in-house, or because they don't have time to patch it because it's a critical server, for instance. So unlike the usual traditional cyber criminal threats, like the usual spam or malware, APTs, they are not automatic, they are not indiscriminate, and they are not opportunistic. So again, going back to the gun analogy, this is not a shotgun approach. It requires a deliberate part for the attacker to easily customize and adapt their attacks depending on how their target moves. Yeah, so basically that's it. They're deliberate, purposeful, and persistent. And as we know, distribution is slow. Okay, it's very targeted. But once you get infected or attacked, we know that, based on the headlines that we've read so far, the impact is very high. Data breaches, monetary loss, the other stuff. According to our researchers, there are 6 stages of an APT attack. So similar to like a military operation, for example, an attacker needs to have intelligence about the target first. This is what we call the intelligence gathering. This is where Google comes in. No, I'm just kidding. Because intelligence gathering usually requires several searches or research. There's this open source research, so to speak, or what we call Googling, because let's face it, organizations have lots of data available in the internet right now. Don't you agree? Like, go to a company website, you already have the organizational chart there. You already have email addresses for certain contacts available there. So it can be as basic as that. It can also be as more technical as like finding out the information or the infrastructure itself of the organization. The reason that they are gathering as much intel as possible is that later on, they will now try to launch an attack. They want to find a point of entry. Usually, based on our research, the point of entry that they use is the most common means of communication utilized by organizations. And what is that? It's email, right? That's the most common form of communication on organizations or in companies. So as you've seen in the Jeremy Lin scenario, it used an email with a malicious attachment. But please note that they can also use a malicious link where the website or the file can be downloaded. They can also use the other forms of communication like instant messaging or Facebook. Okay. Here's an example of a sample email message that we received that's related to a targeted attack. Okay. Based on my colleagues here in the Taipei office, so this is a message confirming an email or an e-ticket for an airline. Is that correct? So as you can notice, it's very legitimate looking, right? Compared to the usual spam that our messaging servers receive. I know I've blurred the recipient here, but you can see it's targeted to a specific individual. Okay? I've also blurred the from field, but it's actually spoofing an airline company. And the message is very clear. It's very official looking. It even has like the address and the phone number. And the type of conversation or communication is also common to offices or to organizations. Airline ticket. Our CEOs usually have like these types of emails, right, to confirm where they're traveling. Other examples that we have received before include email messages about payroll or invitation to a conference. Okay. It's very legitimate looking. It's very official sounding that sometimes employees do not have to think twice to click on it. But anyway, once it executes, the malware is already executed into the network. Okay. This tool that the attacker is using now phones home to the remote attacker. This is what we call the command and control communication. It tells the attacker, hey, I'm already inside this network. Okay? I'm open to any commands that you want me to do. We should note here that the command and control communication, by definition of advanced persistent threats, they want to be as low-key as possible. They want to be as undetected as possible. Because the goal here is to infiltrate the network, correct? So sometimes the communication is very, very discreet. They cover their tracks by going to the traffic. They usually use the HTTP traffic, normal web traffic, to send out their commands. Also, the communication or the connection is it's like a stop and go. They usually just like check each other like once a week or once a month. Because like constant communication or a constant stream there might be very suspicious for those who are monitoring the network logs. The reason that they want to be as undetected as possible is that going towards the stage 4, or lateral movement, they want now to search the network for important files or important information. We all know that it's not usually the case that once they enter the network, that's where all the information is available. If you are looking for a mail server, or it's not usually via the HR personnel that opened the malicious email, right? So that's why they have to go through this stage of finding out which way is where, which access does it need to gain privileges, which server to look for. And once they were able to find what they're looking for, or once they find information that looks important, oh, there's a mail server, it looks important. It now proceeds to the data exfiltration. It now sends this information to the attacker. So again, trying to stay as undetected as possible, this does not happen at one go. They can usually just like send a text file with all the directories. Okay. You cannot just like send like terabytes of email messages in one go. It will cause detection, right? So these are the stages of an APT. And just as you can see, like I said, the goal of APT attacks is to stay as undetected as possible. Their primary goal is to infiltrate an organization. They want to stay as undetected, and they want to stay there for longer periods of time, just in case new, more important information comes up within the organization. Here's just like a map of the APT campaigns that Trend Micro and other security researchers have monitored for the past couple of years. Okay. As you can see, the color-coded ones represent a campaign, and as you can see, it's very widespread all over the world. Okay. It's very targeted, so the colors are significant, but at the same time, it's very diverse. Okay. There's also a snapshot of the targeted organizations these campaigns usually target. And just to summarize them, so far, the organizations that we have seen that are being targeted include civil society organizations or non-government organizations like activist groups, business enterprises, particularly those verticals that involve in utilities, energy, and finance, okay, and of course, government and military networks. Okay. So you might ask now, at this point you might be asking, so how does Trend Micro know all about this, right? Well, that's because in TrendLabs, we have a dedicated team of researchers that's focused on researching about APT campaigns. So they work not only within Trend Micro, but also with other organizations to investigate certain kinds of campaigns or attacks. Okay? So in this stage, I'd like to share with you, how the process usually goes in an investigation of an APT. Very high level, because it can be too technical. Even I myself cannot explain it properly. Okay? But I'd like to stress though that we should remember that APT investigations take a lot of time. The campaigns that we've monitored, like I said, it's been like a year-long investigation, not just by Trend Micro, but also by other security researchers. That's because, unlike the traditional file or URL or spam analysis, wherein we have like, oh, there's a file, let's analyze it, let's get a cleanup for this. Okay. APT campaigns usually looks like a puzzle piece. You think you have like one malicious, the usual malware, but when you put it alongside other malware or other tools, you will see that, hey, there's a pattern going on in here. And sometimes those pieces of the puzzle may not appear as suddenly as possible. Okay. So talking about Lucky Cat, so On the slide is a summary of what Lucky Cat campaign does. Okay. Lucky Cat has been, we reported about Lucky Cat about a couple of months ago. And its victims are organizations in the aerospace, energy, engineering, shipping, military research, and Tibetan activists industry. Some of the victims are primarily in India, Japan, and Tibet, but we've also seen several infections in some European countries. Its preferred malware is what Trend Micro detects as Troj-WIMI. It's a Trojan downloader that downloads additional files into the system, typically a backdoor. And the modus operandi is that, again, it uses a social engineered targeted email. We talked about this earlier, so it exploits a vulnerability in MS Office, so it's an MS Word document, but it can also exploit Adobe Reader, Adobe Flash as an attachment. For its command and controls communication, like the phone home server, it uses free web hosting. So that's its way of staying undetected. It uses a third-party web host that is not malicious, so that like those who are monitoring the traffic that's coming out of an organization will say, oh, it's like a normal web hosting anyway, so it might be not that malicious. But what is notable about the Lucky Cat campaign is that it has an identifiable communication fingerprint. So how it communicates with the server has its unique signature, and it's this. So it has its own kind of like a script, okay, with the host name, the MAC address, and the campaign code. So with this information, our researchers were able to see, oh, this is how the campaign might look like, and let's see if there are other hits in our systems. And sure enough, okay, when we searched, okay, we found several hits in different countries. And even when we checked Google, so there's like a unusual search result there. Okay, apart from the usual malware, the competitor websites. Okay, here's another piece of the puzzle in the Lucky Cat campaign. One of the dropped files is a backdoor called Poison Ivy, and one of its characteristic is that it usually uses a password that's admin, and the mutex is like a 9-character random characters signature. So mutex is usually what the malware has as a signature whenever it's running in memory. So it has its 9 characters there. So again, looking at our feeds in our logs, we're able to find out that, hey, this default admin password has something similar to this one in Europe. They have the same characteristics. Okay? And speaking of mutexes, which has 9 characters, okay, you can see that they also have the same password here. Okay. So again, so it's really like a kind of tedious, very deliberate research on our part. And once we put the pieces of the puzzle together, and it's just like, again, one piece of it, we're able to find out that, hey, several campaigns in Japan and in other countries, not only do they have the same mutex or the same malware that's being used, they might be even connecting to same addresses or IP addresses. Okay. So this is how we normally investigate like an APT campaign. Okay. This presentation is quite, very high level. So I'm pretty sure our researchers are doing a lot more work than that. But it gives you the picture that, like I said, APT investigations take time and effort to be uncovered. That's how smart these threat attackers are. As we've been saying for over and over again, they want to be as undetected as possible. The good thing is that, with these types of investigations, we're also able to uncover several developments, to keep us up to date in what's happening right now in the APT space. Especially right now, wherein, like we said, APT is now being talked about. Attackers do not want that. They want to be as hidden as possible, right? So they are now devising new ways to stay as hidden as possible so that organizations and researchers cannot see their tracks. Here's one recent development that we've seen. There's an APT campaign that we've uncovered a couple of weeks ago. It's called iSushi. Okay. The thing about iSushi is that it now uses infected or computers inside its target network as its command and control server. So it does not phone home outside anymore. It's using like a bot inside the organization. So what does this imply? For those who are monitoring network traffic, how can you distinguish which one is malicious or which one is like, a normal computer-to-computer, office-mate-to-office-mate file transfer, for instance? Because you have two computers that's legitimately inside your network. How would you know which of these activities are malicious? That's also makes it difficult for it to be taken down, because if you block this particular access to a machine, okay, there might be some repercussions within the organization. Okay. We're talking about mobile. I think there's another room about consumerization on the other end of the hall, right? But did you know that APTs are also embracing bring your own device or consumerization? Okay. We've talked about Lucky Cat. We've seen that further investigations in Lucky Cat revealed that they seem to be now developing tools geared for mobile. We found 2 malicious Android apps within their Lucky Cat servers that is capable of doing remote access tool functionalities. It can send data from the phone to a remote location. It can download updated versions of the malware. Okay. And it explores the phone and which one contains valuable data. So it seems that going with the trend of employees being more and more mobile, bringing their smartphones or their tablets with company information, APT attackers are also going to that trend. Interesting, isn't it? Also scary, right? Are you guys scared? Okay. So the question now, given all this information, is that what can enterprises, organizations can do about APTs? Let me ask you a question, especially those, you guys working in organizations. How many of you feel that your organization has been targeted by APTs before? No one? Interesting. How many of you feel that your organization will be targeted by APTs in the future? Okay, quite few. Okay. In a study that I've read somewhere, okay, there's like 56% of organizations are quite certain that they have been targeted by APTs before. And that's a scary number. But you know what? For me, we should use it as a strength of our own. If you're scared, that's good. Because that way, you can now prepare yourselves to defend your organizations against APTs. Because as we've known, APT actors are very intelligent. They want to stay as undetected as possible. But hey, what's stopping us from being as intelligent as they are? Or if not smarter than they are? And this is what we call threat intelligence. Okay? What can organizations do against APTs? Then have like a threat intelligence system in their place. And by threat intelligence, you can basically sum it up into 3. Tools, tactics, and talent. Okay? In terms of tools, okay, part of the recommendations from our researchers is that organizations should enhance the visibility of networks, okay, and monitoring for insight and control. I'm sure your organizations have like server logs, endpoint logs, but who is reading them? Sometimes these are the most underutilized records or documents, but in the cases of APTs, these may be the most useful because, like I said, they want to be as undetected as possible. Okay? So sometimes we want to make the visibility to be as present as possible. Tools. Consider solutions that can do integrity checks. Okay? Some solutions are capable of doing that. Later on in this session, my colleagues will talk about how Trend Micro, the products in Trend Micro can do such things to combat APTs. Okay? But also do that, but also consider doing integrity checks, because APTs, they try to leave as much trace as possible, but they do change some settings in the registry, for example. So someone must have to look into that. And finally, talent. Empower the humans in your organization. This is where the organization, the organizational educational awareness will come into play. This is where your IT administrators need to be empowered. Because you might not have the tools, you might have the tools available, but there should be someone who is actively reading into it or looking into it and getting insight out of it. That's because humans also are the ones capable of doing external threat intelligence by attending conferences like this or by reading the latest attacks other organizations might have experienced. Then they can see, this particular attack might be using this particular code, similar to that one, right? The string in Lucky Cat. Maybe it's the time that he can now check to the logs and see if they have been infected as well. Okay? Tools, talents, and tactics. Okay? So that way, okay, I've started with a picture. Okay? I'll also like to end with a picture, and this is this one. I think this encompasses the message of what APTs is all about. One does not simply scan for advanced persistent threats. We've known for a fact that, by the term itself, they're advanced, they're persistent, and they're a threat to their environment, to our organizations, right? Sometimes traditional solutions are not enough. But like I said, if there's advanced persistent threats, what's stopping us from doing advanced persistent defense in our organization? Thank you.
谢谢 Paul Oliveria 精辟的分享。